Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the all gracious, all merciful. We take refuge in God from Satan, the rejected. I am Taher Amini. I will be at your service in another session in the issue of communications and also propagations. We are talking about models of communications, which will complete the discussions we had in the former episodes. In the former episodes, we talked about different models of communication. Aristotelian model. We talked about Harold Laswell model. We talked about Shannon and Weber, and we will continue the last model we started in our previous discussion, which is about Wilber-Schramm's model. Wilber-Schramm's model, which was coined, as we mentioned, in 1954, we talked in detail about this model. We said that it has different parts, but in majority it is classified and it is we can categorize in two main boxes. One box is the sender, the other box is receiver, and the receiver box in the final stage itself will be a sender, and the first box, which was formerly a sender, will be a receiver. And between them there are messages which is sent, and this is very cyclical. Talked in detail in the former discussion about this model. But in continuation in the Wilber-Schramm's model, I have to say that he tried many models to convey, as a matter of fact, his insight, and finally his main model was the very effective model which was coined in 1954. His model was emphasized on the dynamism of human communication. He is so insistent on the point that the process of the communication of human beings is very dynamic, and accordingly this dynamism of human communication must be interconnected. And this cyclical model that he talked is, as a matter of fact, very dynamic in human communication. In addition, he points out that people interact in a constant cyclical fashion. In this model, he emphasizes that people are interacting, constantly interacting with one another, and this is very cyclical. What does it mean it's cyclical? It means that when I talk to you, I will get the feedback of my speech on you and my impression on you, and I will get the feedback. So it means that when I talk to you, I send you a message, and then via feedback you send me another message. So it is cyclical and it is dynamic. And in this way, as formerly we mentioned, the best way of communication is the face-to-face communication, which has the instant feedback. I mean, that, for example, when in a class, the professor is talking to the student, so since he gets the feedback instantly and immediately, there is no immediacy in the feedback process, so it is very dynamic. Contrary to this one, for example, when you talk in a recorded program, in a TV, or for example, when you see a movie in a TV channel, it is not dynamic because it is one-way communication. It is a bullseye communication. It is not ping-pong communication. It is not mutual. Because via TV, in movies, TV channel, the sender is the main source of sending the message, and there is no feedback because you're just watching. Is it plausible? Can you think of this point that when you are watching a movie, okay, in one point you are not interested in one part of the movie, and immediately there is a change in the scenario of the movie? For sure not. The movie is made, for example, 10 years ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, sometimes 50 years ago, okay? So, and it is just one way. It is not bilateral. It is not ping-pong way of, we can say way of communication. Because these are two terms in the interpersonal communication. It is meant that in interpersonal communication there are two main ways of communication. One is bull's-eye view. In bull's-eye, when at the former time, in the last times, okay, when the cowboys wanted to target a wild cow and a bull, they usually targeted the eye of the bull. And from that on, it has been named after this model that one-way communication is like bull's eye view communication. It means that you are just the sender. But when it is like the tennis, when it is like ping pong, you send, he sends, you send, he sends. There's a dynamism. So in Wilbersham's model, which is very cyclical, he says that first of all, Wilbersham mentions that I wanted to show the dynamism of human communication. Secondly, the cyclical fashion of human communication, which is based on interaction and also constant interaction. And his model is one of the models which is, as a matter of fact, highlighted as the model of interaction and process. First of all, it is a process. It is very systematic. Secondly, interaction is very important in his model. So this was, in brief, the Wilbersham's model of communication, and it has gained some attraction, interest among the scholars in 1954. The next model, which was based on the heritage of the former scholars, was the Berlow's model. Berlow was one of the communicationists and one of the theoreticians who talked about his model, and he has named his model as SMCR. SMCR is the abbreviation of source, message, channel, and receiver. S stands for source, M stands for message, C stands for channel, and R stands for receiver. So when, for example, one asks about the model of SMCR model in communication, you have to say it is firstly about the Berlow's model of communication, and secondly, it is somehow linear, and it talks about four elements: source, message, channel, and receiver. Now, what are the points in his model? He, as a matter of fact, classifies the process of communication as the former ones. It is now very understandable. He says that we have four steps, we have four stages: source at the first and receiver at the end and at the destination, and there are two other things in the middle, which are the messages and channels. But he mentions some points as the subcategory of these four elements of his model. The subcategories, as a matter of fact, the sub-subjects of the first and the last, the source and the receiver, are exactly the same. What does it mean? When he talks in the source about 5 points, exactly these 5 points will be repeated at the receiver. What are these 5 points? In source, he says that, Berlow mentions that a source must have first communication skills. The source, for example, when I send you a message, I have to know the skills of communication first. Secondly, I must have attitudes. I must connect and attach. I have to pin my skills and my communicational information to some attitudes, to some intentions, to some perceptions. Okay? My message must not send just in vain and at a nullified point. No, you have to send it connected to attitudes. So, first you have to know the communicational skills. Secondly, you must have attitudes. Thirdly, knowledge. Knowledge is very important in sender and receiver, both of them. If you don't have enough knowledge in talking about different issues, the process of communication will be in problem. So, knowledge. Social system. The fourth point is social system. The sender and receiver, both of them, must have some systematic social networks and social systems. I am living in a social system. For example, I am living in Iran. In Iran, there is a social system. There is a system special for Iran. And I'm aware of this system. I know, for example, the input, output, the main processor inside my system, my social system. I know everything. This social system, if it is very near to the social system of the addressee, the communication process is very safe and sound. In another term, if you refer to the former ones, it is very similar to the field of experience we talked formerly. That when the field of experience, the social system information of both sides of sender and receiver are the same, so in that case, the process of communication is better. And the last one is culture. Social system and culture are somehow separated from one another, and they are very interconnected and intertwined with attitudes. I mean, the social system, the culture, the norms, bads and goods, must do's and must not do, these are the, as a matter of fact, things which affects attitudes. Accordingly, when we talk about these 5 subcategories of source, we have to copy exactly the same in the receiver. If we have in the source communicational skills, in the receiver we have communicational skills. If in the source we have attitudes, in the communication or in the receiver must have attitudes. We must know the attitudes. If the sender must be knowledgeable, the receiver must be knowledgeable too. If the sender must be aware of the social system, the other one must be aware of the social system. If I'm aware of the culture, the other one must be aware of the culture too. So the cultures must be similar, and the social system must be similar. Now, one question: what is the difference between social system and culture in particular? In the communicational studies, or in communications, it has been mentioned that there are different, social system and culture is different from one another. At the first instance, they are very near to each other. However, it is like hyponymy. All the things, which are in the culture are made on a specific social system. So the social system is dominant, and it is very gestaltic on the culture. What does it mean? For example, the social system of Iran is Islamic, and the Shiism is very active, and it is Iranian. The social system of Iranian is religious. The social system of Iran is based on the connectivity of religion and society. The social system of Iran is based on the, for example, religiosity, rationality, spirituality, being a very religious, being very loyal. This social system will create many points in culture. It will create a certain culture, which this culture will be effective and influential in the attitudes of the people. So this is the difference between social system and attitude and the culture. So if we want to illustrate, at the first small cycle, we have attitudes. These attitudes are made inside a culture. The culture is bigger than this attitude. And this attitude and culture is made on a bigger cycle, which is social system. So this was the sender and receiver. In middle, there are, if you remember, we said that the source, receiver, SMCR, source or receiver. We have MC2. M is message and channel. He mentions that in message there are some subcategories too, that the sender or the encoder must be aware of the content, of the elements, of the treatment, structure, and the code. So it has 5 other points: content, element, treatment, structure, and the code. So the sender or the encoder, when wants to send a message, must be aware of these, of the content, elements, treatment, structure, and the code. And after that will be conveyed through a channel, C, through a channel to receiver. These channel also have 5 subcategories that are hearing, seeing, touching, smelling, and tasting. These are the main sensories of human being, which is hearing, seeing, touching, smelling, and tasting. These are the 5 main capabilities of human being. These are the sensory, as a matter of fact, inputs of human beings. So, in general, this was the model of Berlo, SMCR model of Berlo, and it talks, as you paid attention, it talks about many different discussions. Altogether, if we want to classify, he talks about 20 points, 20 subcategories in 4 main categories of source, message, channel, and receiver. Berlo acknowledges that the complexity of the communication process, as evidenced by the influence of several factors on communication, is a kind of all-encompassing system. All-encompassing system. He mentions that, first of all, the model of communication is very complex, very systematic, and it is all-encompassing, and it is very, as a matter of fact, comprehensive. And this model of communication is very socio-cultural model. The model of Berlo is very, as a matter of fact, included in the issue of the socio-cultural framework. So, in short, in this chapter, we talked about Berlo's model, about his model of SMCR, and I hope that this model was also somehow attractive for you, and you have taken some lessons in this regard. Inshallah, in upcoming program, we will talk about some other models. So up to here, we talked about different models. Aristotelian model first. Secondly, we talked about Harold Lasswell model. Then we talked about Shannon and Weaver model. Then we talked about Wilbur Schramm's, and after that, Berlow's. Until the next program, and talking about other models of communication. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.